Alberta's Haunted Pepper Tree Apartments Paranormal Epicenter of Edmonton Chapter 1. The new tenant, the Pepper Tree Apartments, a 12-story monolith in the heart of Edmonton's Oliver neighborhood, had seen better days. Its once pristine brick facade was now weathered, the windows slightly fogged from years of exposure. But for Denise, a young woman with raven black hair and a penchant for the unknown, it was perfect. She had just moved to Edmonton, eager to start her postgraduate studies and leave behind a tumultuous past. The Pepper Tree, with its surprisingly affordable rents and central location, seemed like a godsend. Little did she know, it was more of a Pandora's box. As she lugged her boxes into the lobby, an elderly man with a hunched back and a limp approached her. "You must be the new tenant for the 10th floor," he said, his voice raspy from age. Denise nodded, slightly out of breath. "Yes, that's me. Denise." He extended a frail hand. "Mr. Thompson. I've been the caretaker here for, longer than I care to admit." She shook his hand, noting the coldness of his grip. "Nice to meet you. Is there an elevator?" He pointed to a set of ornate doors with faded gold trim. "Right there. But be careful. It has a mind of its own sometimes." Denise chuckled, thinking he was joking. "I'll keep that in mind." As she waited for the elevator, she noticed an old black and white photograph hanging on the wall. It showed a group of young men, probably in their early 20s, standing on a balcony. They were laughing, drinks in hand, the cityscape of Edmonton behind them. The date at the bottom read, 1982. The elevator dinged, pulling her attention away from the photo. She stepped in, pressing the button for the 10th floor. The doors closed, and the elevator began its ascent. But halfway through, it shuddered to a stop, the lights flickering. Denise's heart raced. She pressed the emergency button, but there was no response. She was about to panic when she felt a cold breeze, even though there were no windows. The temperature in the elevator dropped rapidly, her breath visible in the dim light. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a shadowy figure. It was tall, almost touching the ceiling, its form indistinct. She could feel its gaze on her, even though it had no discernible eyes. The air grew even colder, and she heard whispers, too soft to make out the words but filled with anguish. Suddenly, the elevator jolted back to life, resuming its journey to the 10th floor. The figure vanished, and the temperature returned to normal. Denise was left shaken, her skin covered in goosebumps. The doors opened to reveal a well-lit hallway, identical doors lining both sides. She quickly stepped out, eager to put distance between herself and the elevator. As she fumbled with the keys to her apartment, the door next to hers opened. A woman in her 30s, with auburn hair and a friendly smile, stepped out. "Hey there. You must be the new neighbor. I'm Lisa." Denise managed a weak smile. "Hi, Lisa. I'm Denise." Lisa's eyes twinkled with mischief. "First ride in the haunted elevator?" Denise's eyes widened. "You felt it too?" Lisa nodded. "Oh, honey. We've all had our encounters. But don't worry, it's mostly harmless. Just likes to play tricks on the newbies." Denise was about to ask more when Lisa continued, "But if you ever see a woman in white on the 13th floor, don't engage. Just turn around and walk away." Denise frowned. "But there's no 13th floor." Lisa winked. "Exactly." With that, she walked away, leaving Denise with more questions than answers. She entered her apartment, the weight of the building's history pressing down on her. She had a feeling her stay at the Pepper Tree Apartments was going to be anything but ordinary. As night fell, the sounds of the city faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Denise lay in bed, the events of the day replaying in her mind. The shadowy figure, the cold breeze, the whispers. And Lisa's warning about the woman in white. She was on the verge of sleep when she heard it. Soft footsteps outside her door, followed by a faint whisper. She strained to hear, but the words were indistinct. The footsteps grew louder, stopping right outside her door. Denise held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She waited, the seconds stretching into minutes. But there was no further sound. She let out a sigh of relief, chalking it up to her overactive imagination. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched. And somewhere in the distance, a woman's laughter echoed through the halls of the Pepper Tree Apartments. Chapter 2. Echoes from the past. The sun's first rays painted the Edmonton skyline in hues of gold and crimson. The city was waking up, but the Pepper Tree Apartments seemed to exist in a time of its own, untouched by the dawn's embrace. Denise, having spent a restless night, decided to explore her new surroundings. The previous day's events had left her curious, and she hoped to find answers. She began her exploration in the building's small library, a room filled with dusty old books and newspapers. As she sifted through the archives, a particular headline from 1982 caught her eye: "Tragic fall at Pepper Tree Apartments claims lives of 3 university students." Intrigued, she began to read. The article detailed a tragic event where 3 young men, all university students, had fallen from the 11th floor balcony of the Pepper Tree Apartments. The incident had shocked the community, and the circumstances surrounding their deaths remained a mystery. Witnesses claimed they had been at a party, laughing and enjoying themselves just moments before the tragedy. No one could explain what had led them to the balcony or why they had fallen. As Denise read further, she discovered the names of the students: Michael, Ethan, and Samuel. Their smiling faces stared back at her from a photograph accompanying the article. They looked so full of life, their futures ahead of them. It was heartbreaking to think of their untimely end. Lost in thought, Denise was startled when a voice behind her said, "You're reading about them, aren't you?" She turned to find an elderly woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. "Yes," Denise replied, "it's such a tragic story." The woman nodded, her gaze distant. "I knew them, you know. They were good boys, full of dreams and aspirations. No one could believe it when it happened." Denise hesitated before asking, "Do you know what happened that night?" The woman sighed, her eyes clouding with sorrow. "No one really knows. There were rumors, of course. Some said they were playing a dangerous game on the balcony, others claimed they were pushed. But the truth is, we may never know." Denise felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you think the building is haunted because of their deaths?" The woman looked at her, her gaze sharp. "This building has seen more than its fair share of tragedies. The boys were just one of many. But their deaths did leave a mark. Some say they still roam these halls, searching for answers." Denise shivered, thinking of the shadowy figure she had seen in the elevator. "Have you ever seen them?" The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Once, many years ago. I was coming home late one night when I saw 3 figures standing on the 11th floor balcony. They looked so real, so solid. But when I blinked, they were gone." Denise felt her heart race. "That's terrifying." The woman smiled sadly. "It was. But over the years, I've come to believe that they mean no harm. They're just lost souls, trying to find their way." Denise pondered this for a moment. "Do you think they'll ever find peace?" The woman shrugged. "Who knows? The afterlife is a mystery. But I hope they do. They deserve it." As the morning wore on, Denise continued her exploration of the building. She visited the 11th floor, standing on the balcony where the tragedy had occurred. The view was breathtaking, the city spread out below her. But the weight of the past hung heavy in the air, and she couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. She also visited the infamous 13th floor, or rather, the lack of it. Just as Lisa had said, there was no button for the 13th floor in the elevator. But as she rode past it, she felt a sudden drop in temperature, and the lights flickered ominously. By the time evening fell, Denise was exhausted. She returned to her apartment, hoping for a peaceful night's sleep. But as she lay in bed, she heard the soft footsteps again, followed by the faint whispers. She tried to ignore them, telling herself it was just her imagination. But deep down, she knew that the Pepper Tree Apartments held secrets that were yet to be revealed. As she drifted off to sleep, she dreamt of the 3 students, laughing and joking on the balcony. But as she watched, a shadowy figure appeared behind them, its form indistinct and shifting. The boys didn't seem to notice it, but Denise could feel its malevolent presence. She tried to scream, to warn them, but no sound came out. And then, with a suddenness that took her breath away, they were gone, leaving only the empty balcony behind. She woke up with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The dream had felt so real, so vivid. She lay in bed, trying to calm her racing heart. But as she closed her eyes, she heard a soft voice whisper, "Help us." And she knew that her time at the Pepper Tree Apartments was just beginning. Chapter 3. The first encounter. The days that followed were a blur for Denise. She tried to immerse herself in her studies, hoping to distract herself from the eerie occurrences at the Pepper Tree Apartments. But the building, with its dark history and haunting presence, refused to be ignored. One evening, as she returned from a late-night study session at the university, she decided to take the stairs instead of the elevator, still unnerved by her previous experience. As she ascended, The dimly lit stairwell seemed to close in on her, the shadows playing tricks on her eyes. When she reached the 9th floor, she paused, catching her breath. The silence was palpable, broken only by the distant hum of the city outside. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the stairwell into darkness. Denise's heart raced, her instincts screaming at her to run. But before she could move, she felt a cold breeze, and a soft voice whispered in her ear, "Why did you come here?" She spun around, her eyes straining to see in the darkness. But there was no one there. The lights came back on, revealing an empty stairwell. Shaken, Denise hurried to her apartment, locking the door behind her. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, that the stress of moving to a new city and starting her postgraduate studies was taking its toll. But deep down, she knew that something was not right. The next day, as she was leaving for class, she ran into Lisa in the hallway. "Hey, Denise," Lisa said, her voice cheerful. "How are you settling in?" Denise hesitated, not sure how much to reveal. "It's been interesting," she finally said. Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Oh. Do tell." Denise took a deep breath. "I've been hearing things. Whispers, footsteps. And last night, in the stairwell, I heard a voice." Lisa's cheerful demeanor vanished, replaced by a look of concern. "What did it say?" Denise shivered, remembering the cold breeze and the soft voice. "It asked me why I came here." Lisa looked thoughtful. "You know, you're not the first person to hear that voice. Many tenants have reported similar experiences, especially on the 9th, 10th, and 11th floors." Denise felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you know who it is?" Lisa shook her head. "No one knows for sure. Some say it's the spirit of one of the students who died. Others believe it's an older presence, tied to the building's history. But whatever it is, it's not malevolent. Just curious." Denise wasn't so sure. The voice she had heard had not sounded curious. It had sounded hungry. She decided to do some research, hoping to find answers. She spent hours at the local library, poring over old newspapers and books, looking for any mention of the Peppertree Apartments. She learned that the building had been constructed in the early 1900s and had seen its fair share of tragedies over the years. Fires, accidents, even a murder-suicide in the 1970s. But nothing that could explain the voice she had heard. Frustrated, she decided to seek out Mr. Thompson, the building's caretaker. She found him in the basement, fixing a leaky pipe. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "I wanted to ask you about the voice in the stairwell." He looked up, his eyes wary. "What voice?" Denise took a deep breath. "The one that asks why you came here." Mr. Thompson's face paled, and he put down his tools. "I thought I was the only one who heard it," he whispered. Denise's heart sank. "You've heard it too?" He nodded, his hands trembling. "Many times, over the years. Always the same question, always in the same soft, whispery voice. I've tried to find out who it is, but I've never been able to." Denise felt a mixture of relief and dread. She wasn't alone, but that also meant that the voice was real. "Do you have any idea who it might be?" Mr. Thompson shook his head. "No. But I've always felt that it's not of this world. It's something other." Denise shivered, remembering the cold breeze and the soft voice. "What do you think it wants?" Mr. Thompson looked at her, his eyes filled with sadness. "I don't know. But I've learned to live with it, to accept it as part of the building's history. Maybe, in time, you will too." Denise wasn't so sure. She left the basement, her mind racing. She needed to find answers, to uncover the truth behind the voice. But as she climbed the stairs, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard the soft footsteps again, followed by the faint whispers. She tried to ignore them, telling herself it was just her imagination. But deep down, she knew that the Peppertree Apartments held secrets that were yet to be revealed. And as she drifted off to sleep, she heard the soft voice again, whispering in her ear, "Why did you come here?" And she knew that her time at the Peppertree Apartments was just beginning. Chapter 4. The haunting begins. The Peppertree Apartments, with its towering structure and vintage charm, had always been a topic of hushed conversations in the Oliver neighborhood. But as days turned into weeks, the building seemed to awaken, its dormant spirits restless. Denise, now more attuned to the building's peculiarities, began to notice odd occurrences. It started subtly. Her keys would vanish from the table only to reappear in the refrigerator, or she'd find her shoes neatly paired in the middle of the living room. But soon, the incidents escalated. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the university, Denise returned home to find her apartment in disarray. Books were strewn across the floor, cushions upturned, and her cherished family photos lay face down. But what unnerved her the most was the message written on her bathroom mirror in a foggy residue. "Why are you here?" She reached out to Lisa, hoping for some solace. "It's getting worse," Denise whispered over the phone, her voice trembling. Lisa, ever the voice of reason, tried to calm her. "Look, old buildings have their quirks. Maybe there's a logical explanation." But Denise wasn't convinced. "Writing on my mirror? That's not a quirk, Lisa. That's a message." The two decided to meet at a local cafe, away from the oppressive atmosphere of the pepper tree. As they sipped their coffees, Denise recounted the strange events, her eyes darting around as if expecting the entity to appear. Lisa, looking more concerned than Denise had ever seen her, finally spoke. "I've heard whispers from other tenants. Cold spots in their apartments, lights flickering, even apparitions. It's not just you." Denise felt a chill. "What do they see?" Lisa hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Shadowy figures, mostly. But Mrs. Henderson on the 9th floor. She claims she saw a woman in white, standing at the foot of her bed." Denise remembered Lisa's earlier warning about the woman in white. "What did she do?" "She screamed, and the figure vanished. But she swears it was real. She's even thinking of moving out." The two sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Finally, Lisa spoke. "Maybe it's time to bring in someone. A professional." Denise looked up, hope in her eyes. "You mean like a paranormal investigator?" Lisa nodded. "Exactly. I know someone, Max. He's helped people in the past. Maybe he can help us." With a plan in place, Denise felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was determined to uncover the truth, to put an end to the haunting. The next day, Max arrived at the pepper tree. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and a rugged demeanor, he exuded confidence. He listened intently as Denise recounted her experiences, occasionally jotting down notes. After a thorough inspection of her apartment, Max set up his equipment: infrared cameras, EVP recorders, and electromagnetic field detectors. "If there's something here, we'll find it," he assured Denise. That night, as darkness enveloped the building, the investigation began. Max, Denise, and Lisa sat in the living room, the only light coming from the infrared cameras. Hours passed with little activity. But just as they were about to call it a night, a cold breeze swept through the apartment, despite all the windows being closed. The electromagnetic field detector began to beep erratically. Max, his voice barely above a whisper, instructed, "Ask it a question." Denise hesitated, then finally spoke. "Who are you?" The room was silent, the tension palpable. Then, from the EVP recorder, came a soft, whispery voice. "Help us." Lisa gasped, her face pale. Max, ever the professional, continued the questioning. "Why are you here?" Again, the soft voice replied, "Trapped." The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, the temperature dropping rapidly. Shadows danced on the walls, forming into 3 distinct figures. Denise recognized them from the photograph: Michael, Ethan, and Samuel. The figures pointed towards the balcony, their faces contorted in anguish. Denise, tears streaming down her face, whispered, "I'm so sorry." With a final, mournful look, the figures vanished, leaving the room in darkness. The investigation had taken a toll on everyone. Max, packing up his equipment, spoke. "This is one of the most active locations I've ever investigated. But I believe we can help them." Denise, exhausted but determined, nodded. "We have to. They deserve peace." As dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the city, the Pepper Tree apartment stood silent, its secrets yet to be fully revealed. But one thing was clear: the haunting had only just begun. Chapter 5. The ritual. The days following the investigation were a whirlwind of activity. Max, having consulted with other experts in the field, believed that a ritual was necessary to free the trapped spirits of Michael, Ethan, and Samuel. The Pepper Tree Apartments, with its rich history and countless tragedies, had become a beacon for lost souls, and the 3 young men were just the tip of the iceberg. Denise, still reeling from the events of that night, was determined to help. She reached out to the families of the 3 students, hoping to gain their blessing for the ritual. To her surprise, they were not only supportive but also wanted to be present, to finally say their goodbyes. The ritual was set for the night of the new moon, a time when the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest. Max had enlisted the help of a local medium, Alara, known for her ability to communicate with the other side. As night fell, the group gathered in Denise's apartment. The room was lit only by candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the room stood a table, upon which lay various ritualistic items, a bowl of salt water, sage, and 3 white roses, one for each of the students. Alara, dressed in a flowing white gown, began the ritual. Her voice, soft and melodic, filled the room as she called upon the spirits of the Pepper Tree Apartments. "We are here to help you, to guide you to the light. Show yourselves." The room grew cold, and the candles flickered wildly. Slowly, shadowy figures began to materialize, their forms indistinct and shifting. Among them, Denise recognized the familiar faces of Michael, Ethan, and Samuel. Alara continued, her voice growing stronger, "We offer you these roses, symbols of love and remembrance. Take them and find your peace." One by one, the figures approached the table, their hands reaching out to touch the roses. As they did, a soft light enveloped them, and they began to fade, their forms becoming more solid, more real. The families of the students, tears streaming down their faces, whispered their goodbyes, their voices filled with love and sorrow. "We love you," they whispered, "find your peace." As the last figure vanished, the room grew warm, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The ritual was complete. Alara, exhausted but satisfied, spoke, "They are free. The Pepper Tree Apartments is no longer their prison." The group, overcome with emotion, hugged each other, grateful for the closure they had found. Denise, her heart heavy but hopeful, looked around her apartment, the memories of the past few weeks flooding back. She knew she would never forget the events that had transpired, the spirits she had encountered, and the friends she had made. But as she gazed out of her window, the city of Edmonton spread out before her, she felt a sense of peace. The haunting of the Pepper Tree Apartments was over, and the lost souls that had once roamed its halls had finally found their way home. And as dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the city, the Pepper Tree Apartment stood silent, its secrets finally laid to rest. Chapter 6. The unseen presence. The ritual had brought a semblance of peace to the Pepper Tree Apartments, but for Denise, the quiet was unsettling. The weight of the building's history pressed down on her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, she heard a soft knock on her door. Opening it, she found Lisa, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Denise," she whispered, "it's back." Confused, Denise invited her in. "What's back?" Lisa hesitated, taking a deep breath before speaking. "The woman in white. I saw her." Denise felt a chill run down her spine. "Where?" "In the hallway, just outside my apartment. She was standing there, staring at me. And then she just vanished." The two sat in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. The ritual had freed the spirits of the 3 students, but it seemed that the Pepper Tree Apartments still held other secrets. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Denise decided to consult Max. He arrived the next day, his equipment in tow. "I had a feeling we weren't done here," he said, his voice grim. The investigation began in Lisa's apartment. Max set up his equipment, the familiar hum of the electromagnetic field detector filling the room. Hours passed with little activity, but just as they were about to call it a night, the temperature dropped and the lights flickered. From the shadows, a figure emerged, her form ethereal and glowing. It was the woman in white, her face obscured by a veil. She moved towards them, her movements graceful and fluid. Denise, her heart racing, stepped forward. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure paused, her head tilting slightly. And then, in a voice that was soft and melodic, she spoke, "I am lost. I cannot find my way." Max, his voice steady, asked, "How can we help you?" The figure hesitated, her form flickering. "I am looking for my love. He promised he would wait for me." Denise felt a pang of sympathy. "Who is your love? Maybe we can help you find him." The figure's form became more solid, her features becoming clearer. "His name is Robert. We were to be married, but fate had other plans." Max, his curiosity piqued, asked, "What happened?" The figure, her voice filled with sorrow, replied, "We were separated by war. He went to fight, and I waited for him. But he never returned. I searched for him, but all I found was his grave. Heartbroken, I took my own life, hoping to be reunited with him in death. But I am trapped here, unable to move on." Denise, tears in her eyes, whispered, "We will help you." We will find Robert and reunite you. The figure nodded, her form fading. Thank you, she whispered, her voice echoing in the silence. The investigation had taken a toll on everyone. Max, packing up his equipment, spoke, "We need to find Robert. We need to help her move on." Denise nodded, determination in her eyes. "We will. We owe it to her." The next day, Denise and Max visited the local archives, searching for any mention of Robert. Hours turned into days, but finally, they found a lead. A newspaper article from the 1940s detailed the tragic death of a young soldier named Robert, who had died in battle. His fiancée, heartbroken by the news, had taken her own life. Armed with this information, Denise and Max returned to the Peppertree Apartments. They held a séance, hoping to communicate with Robert and reunite him with his lost love. As the candles flickered, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Robert, his form solid and real. He looked around, confusion in his eyes. "Where am I? Where is she?" Denise, her voice gentle, spoke, "She's been looking for you. She's trapped here, unable to move on." Robert's face crumpled in sorrow. "I never wanted this for her. I wanted her to be happy." Denise took his hand, guiding him towards the woman in white, who had appeared in the doorway. The two figures moved towards each other, their forms merging into one. And then, with a blinding flash of light, they vanished, leaving the room in darkness. The haunting of the Peppertree Apartments was finally over. The lost souls that had once roamed its halls had found their peace, and the building, with its rich history and countless tragedies, could finally rest. And as dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the city, Denise looked out of her window, a sense of peace and contentment filling her. She had faced the unknown, and in doing so, had found her purpose. The Peppertree Apartments, with its secrets and mysteries, had become her home. Chapter 7. Echoes of the past. The Peppertree Apartments, once a hub of spectral activity, now stood silent. The haunting tales that had once dominated conversations in the Oliver neighborhood had faded, replaced by a sense of peace and closure. But for Denise, the building's quietude was deceptive. The past, with its myriad secrets, had a way of echoing into the present. One evening, as autumn leaves danced in the wind outside, Denise sat in her living room, engrossed in a book. The soft glow of the lamp cast a warm hue over the room, creating an ambiance of serenity. But this tranquility was shattered when she heard a faint, melodic tune wafting through the air. It was a lullaby, one she recognized from her childhood. Startled, she looked around, trying to locate the source. The music seemed to be emanating from the old radio she had recently purchased at a garage sale. But the radio was unplugged. Curiosity piqued, Denise approached the radio, the lullaby growing louder. As she touched the device, a rush of images flooded her mind. A young woman, dressed in early 20th century attire, singing the lullaby to a baby. The same woman, now older, looking out of a window with tears in her eyes. And finally, the Peppertree Apartments, standing tall against the backdrop of a bygone era. The vision ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Denise disoriented. She realized that the radio was more than just an antique. It was a conduit to the past. Determined to uncover the story behind the vision, Denise began her research. She delved into the history of the Peppertree Apartments, focusing on its early years. Her efforts led her to the tale of Eleanor, a young woman who had lived in the building in the 1920s. Eleanor, a talented singer, had fallen in love with a musician named Thomas. The two had dreamt of a life filled with music and love. But fate had other plans. Thomas was drafted into the war, leaving a pregnant Eleanor behind. He never returned, and Eleanor, heartbroken, had raised their child alone, her dreams of a musical career shattered. The lullaby Denise had heard was one Eleanor used to sing to her baby, a song of love and longing. Moved by Eleanor's story, Denise felt a deep connection to the young woman. She decided to hold a séance, hoping to communicate with her and offer solace. With Lisa and Max by her side, Denise began the ritual. The room, lit only by candles, took on an ethereal glow. As the séance progressed, a cold breeze swept through the room, and the scent of roses filled the air. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was Eleanor, her form radiant and glowing. She looked at Denise, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice melodic. "You have given me peace." Denise, tears in her eyes, replied, "Your story touched my heart. I wanted to help." Eleanor smiled, her form beginning to fade. "I can now be with my Thomas. Thank you for reuniting us." As she vanished, the room was filled with the soft strains of music, a duet between Eleanor and Thomas, their voices harmonizing in a song of love and reunion. The séance had taken an emotional toll on everyone. As they sat in silence, reflecting on the events, Max spoke. The Peppertree Apartments is a special place. It's a bridge between the past and the present, between the living and the dead. Denise nodded in agreement. It's more than just a building. It's a keeper of stories, of memories. Lisa, looking thoughtful, added, and thanks to you, Denise, these stories are being heard, and these souls are finding peace. Denise smiled, her heart full. I'm just a conduit, a link between two worlds. But I'm honored to be a part of this journey. As dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the city, the Peppertree Apartment stood tall, its walls echoing with tales of love, loss, and redemption. And Denise, with her newfound purpose, was ready to uncover more stories, to be the voice for those who could no longer speak. Chapter 8. Whispers in the Walls. The Peppertree Apartments, with its storied past and myriad secrets, had become a focal point in Denise's life. Each corner of the building seemed to whisper tales of yesteryears, and Denise, with her newfound sensitivity to the spiritual realm, was all ears. One chilly evening, as winter's grip tightened around Edmonton, Denise was startled by a soft tapping sound. It seemed to be coming from within the walls of her apartment. Curious, she placed her ear against the cold plaster, trying to discern the source. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, accompanied by muffled voices. Straining to listen, Denise could make out a conversation between two people, their tones urgent and hushed. They mustn't find out, a woman's voice whispered. It's too dangerous. A man's voice, deep and soothing, replied, Don't worry, my love. Our secret is safe. Intrigued, Denise decided to investigate further. She recalled an old blueprint of the Peppertree Apartments she had come across during her research. Retrieving it from her study, she noticed something peculiar. Behind her apartment's living room wall was a sealed-off room, not accessible from any part of the building. With Lisa and Max's help, Denise decided to uncover this hidden chamber. Armed with tools, the trio began their work. Hours of labor revealed a heavy wooden door, its surface marred by age and neglect. With bated breath, Denise pushed it open. The room inside was shrouded in darkness, the air thick with dust. As their torches pierced the gloom, they revealed a scene frozen in time. An elegantly set dining table, two chairs pulled close, and in the center, a locket, its chain tangled. Denise picked it up, carefully opening the delicate piece. Inside was a photograph of a striking couple, their eyes filled with love and mischief. The woman bore a striking resemblance to the voice Denise had heard. As she held the locket, the room seemed to come alive. The candles on the table lit up, casting a soft glow. The voices returned, their conversation continuing. We have to leave, my love, the woman's voice said, filled with sorrow. They'll never accept our love. The man's voice, filled with determination, replied, Then we'll go somewhere they can't find us. We'll start anew. The room grew colder, and a soft melody began to play, a haunting tune that spoke of love and loss. The couple, their forms ethereal, appeared, dancing to the music, lost in each other's arms. Denise, Lisa, and Max watched in awe, the beauty of the moment not lost on them. As the song ended, the couple paused, looking directly at Denise. Thank you, the woman whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. You've given us peace. With a final embrace, the couple faded, leaving the room in darkness once more. The trio, overwhelmed by the experience, sat in silence, reflecting on the events. Max, his voice filled with wonder, spoke, This building is truly remarkable. It's a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. Lisa, her eyes glistening with tears, added, And thanks to Denise, these stories are being heard, these souls are finding peace. Denise, holding the locket close to her heart, replied, I'm just a vessel, a bridge between two worlds. But I'm honored to be a part of this journey. As dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the city, the Peppertree Apartment stood tall, its walls echoing with tales of love, loss, and redemption. And Denise, with her heart full of stories, was ready to uncover more, to be the voice for those who could no longer speak. Chapter 9. The Shadowed Staircase. The days following the discovery of the hidden room were quiet, almost eerily so. The Peppertree Apartments, which had been a constant source of spectral activity, seemed to have settled into a peaceful slumber. But Denise knew better than to be lulled into a false sense of security. The building had many layers, and she had only just begun to peel them back. One evening, as a thick fog enveloped Edmonton, Denise was drawn to the old staircase at the end of the hallway. It was seldom used, with most residents preferring the modern elevator. The wooden steps, worn down by time, spiraled upwards, disappearing into the gloom. As she approached, a cold draft swept past her, carrying with it the faint scent of roses. Curious, Denise began to ascend. With each step, the atmosphere grew heavier, the weight of the past pressing down on her. Halfway up, she paused, hearing the soft sound of weeping. It was coming from above, echoing down the staircase. Taking a deep breath, Denise continued her ascent, the sobbing growing louder with each step. Reaching the top, she found herself on a landing, a single door facing her. It was slightly ajar, a soft light spilling out. Pushing it open, Denise stepped into a room that seemed untouched by time. Elegant drapes framed the windows, their fabric faded but still beautiful. In the center stood a grand piano, its surface polished to a shine. And seated at it, her back to Denise, was a woman, her form solid and real. She was playing a haunting melody, her fingers dancing over the keys. As the final notes faded, she turned, her eyes red from crying. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice filled with suspicion. Denise, taken aback by the woman's presence, replied, "My name is Denise. I live in the Pepper Tree Apartments." "Who are you?" The woman, her posture defensive, answered, "I am Isabel. This is my home." Denise, realizing that she was speaking to a spirit, tried to keep her voice calm. "Isabel, why are you here? Why are you crying?" Isabel, her eyes filled with sorrow, replied, "I am waiting for him. He promised he would return." Denise, her heart going out to the woman, asked, "Who are you waiting for?" Isabel, tears streaming down her face, answered, "My love, Alexander. We were to be married, but he went to war. He wrote to me, telling me he would be back, that we would be together. But he never returned." Denise, moved by Isabel's story, spoke, "I want to help you. I want to reunite you with Alexander." Isabel, hope shining in her eyes, whispered, "Would you? Could you?" Denise nodded, determination in her eyes. "I will. I promise." The two women, one living, one dead, formed a bond that night. And as dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the city, Denise set out on her mission, determined to bring peace to Isabel and reunite her with her lost love. Her search led her to the local archives, where she delved into the history of the Pepper Tree Apartments and its residents. Days turned into weeks, but finally, she found a lead. A newspaper article from the 1940s detailed the tragic death of a young soldier named Alexander, who had died in battle. His fiancée, Isabel, heartbroken by the news, had never married, living out her days in the Pepper Tree Apartments, waiting for her love's return. Armed with this information, Denise returned to the building, determined to reunite the two lost souls. She held a séance, calling upon Alexander's spirit. As the candles flickered, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Alexander, his form solid and real. He looked around, confusion in his eyes. "Where am I? Where is Isabel?" Denise, her voice gentle, spoke, "She's been waiting for you. She's here, in the Pepper Tree Apartments." Alexander's face lit up with joy. "Take me to her." Denise led him to the room where she had first encountered Isabel. The two spirits, reunited after decades apart, embraced, their forms merging into one. And then, with a blinding flash of light, they vanished, leaving the room in darkness. The Pepper Tree Apartments, with its rich history and countless tragedies, had once again borne witness to a tale of love and loss. And Denise, with her heart full of stories, was ready to uncover more, to be the voice for those who could no longer speak. Chapter 10. The Room of Mirrors. The Pepper Tree Apartments had become a beacon of spectral activity, drawing Denise deeper into its labyrinth of memories with each passing day. The building, with its ornate architecture and echoing hallways, seemed to pulse with life, each heartbeat resonating with tales from the past. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Denise was drawn to a door she had never noticed before. Situated at the end of a dimly lit corridor, the door was unlike any other in the building. It was ornate, with intricate carvings of faces, each one displaying a different emotion: joy, sorrow, anger, and fear. Intrigued, Denise reached out to touch the door. As her fingers brushed against the cold wood, she felt a jolt of energy, and the door swung open of its own accord. Stepping inside, Denise found herself in a room unlike any she had ever seen. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one reflecting her image. But as she looked closer, she realized that the reflections were not her own. They were versions of her, each one displaying a different emotion, mirroring the faces on the door. Confused and slightly unnerved, Denise approached one of the mirrors. The reflection stared back at her, its eyes filled with sorrow. As Denise reached out to touch the glass, the reflection did the same, their fingers meeting in the middle. Suddenly, Denise was pulled into the mirror, the world around her shifting and changing. She found herself in a memory, one that was not her own. She was in a hospital room, the beeping of machines the only sound. In the bed lay a young woman, her face pale and drawn. Beside her stood a man, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice filled with regret. "I should have been there for you." The woman, her voice weak, replied, "It's not your fault. I love you." As the memory faded, Denise was pulled back into the room of mirrors, the weight of the emotion pressing down on her. Shaken, she approached another mirror, this one reflecting anger. Once again, she was pulled into a memory. She was in a courtroom, the atmosphere tense. A man stood in the dock, his face a mask of defiance. "I did what I had to do," he shouted, his voice filled with rage. "They deserved it." The judge, his voice stern, replied, "You will pay for your crimes." As the memory faded, Denise was once again pulled back into the room, her heart racing. Realizing that the mirrors were portals to the past, Denise approached one final mirror, this one reflecting joy. She was in a park, the sun shining brightly. Children laughed and played, their joy infectious. In the center stood a couple, their faces radiant with happiness. "We did it," the woman whispered, holding up a positive pregnancy test. "We're going to be parents." The memory, filled with joy and hope, warmed Denise's heart. As she was pulled back into the room, she realized that the Pepper Tree Apartments was more than just a building. It was a keeper of memories, a bridge between the past and the present. Determined to uncover the story behind the room of mirrors, Denise began her research. She delved into the history of the building, focusing on its early years. Her efforts led her to the tale of a powerful medium who had once lived in the Pepper Tree Apartments. The medium, known for her ability to communicate with the dead, had created the room as a way to access the memories of the building's residents. Armed with this knowledge, Denise realized that she had a responsibility to the souls trapped within the mirrors. She decided to hold a séance, hoping to free them from their prison. With Lisa and Max by her side, Denise began the ritual. The room, lit only by candles, took on an ethereal glow. As the séance progressed, the mirrors began to glow, their light illuminating the room. From each mirror, a figure emerged, their form ethereal and glowing. They were the souls trapped within, their memories forever etched into the glass. Denise, her voice filled with compassion, spoke, "You are free. Your memories have been heard, your stories told." The figures, their faces filled with gratitude, nodded. One by one, they faded, leaving the room in darkness. The séance had taken an emotional toll on everyone. As they sat in silence, reflecting on the events, Max spoke, "The Pepper Tree Apartments is truly remarkable. It's a testament to the power of memories and the strength of the human spirit." Lisa, her eyes glistening with tears, added, "And thanks to Denise, these stories are being heard, these souls are finding peace." Denise, holding one of the mirrors close to her heart, replied, "I'm just a vessel, a bridge between two worlds. But I'm honored to be a part of this journey." As dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the city, the Pepper Tree Apartment stood tall, its walls echoing with tales of love, loss, and redemption. And Denise, with her heart full of stories, was ready to uncover more, to be the voice for those who could no longer speak. We hope you have enjoyed our introduction to the Pepper Tree Apartment high-rise in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, as Paranormal Scary Story. Please visit us at Paranormal Untold Stories. .com to listen to more of our Scary Stories collection. Paranormal Untold Stories encourages you to contact us if you have your own untold story that you would like our professionals team to put online as a scary story. Thank you. Please follow our YouTube channel, Paranormal Untold Stories, and encourage others to do the same. Paranormal Untold Stories.